Hello and welcome to another Coffee with Developers. I'm very happy today to have an old friend of mine that we haven't seen each other in a long time, but we've had so many good times together. Andy Piper, now head of communications at Mastodon, but you used to work for a lot of companies, right?
Hi, Chris. Yeah, it's great to see you. I've done IBM, which I think I was probably there when we first met. I think you were at Mozilla at the time, perhaps. I did MQTT stuff there for a bit, and then I did Cloud Foundry, VMware for a couple of years. Spent 10 years at Twitter. Did a lot of 9 years at Twitter, strictly speaking. I've done a ton of different open source projects and hackathons and things as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I remember Twitter. I worked for Yahoo back then, I think, and then Mozilla. And every time I needed to have some good food, I visited you in the San Francisco office. Strangely enough, we both were in San Francisco most of the time at the same time, although we both don't live there. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And you had dogs in the office. That's why I was very excited about this as well.
Such a nice place. It was a really lovely place to work, I must say. Yeah.
Sure. Well, seeing that and how things changed, you're now at Mastodon, and this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I like Mastodon. I use it a lot. I'm confused about the UX of some of the interfaces at times, and I guess a lot of other people are as well. So when people ask me about okay, social media, I don't like some companies. We're not going to mention them now. I want to have something that's social media-ish like the others as well. And then we look at Blue Sky, that kind of has the thing. But when I show them Mastodon, people are confused. So what do you think? What is the problem that Mastodon has in this case? Is it too geeky? Is it too hard to understand? Because I mean, with the others, it's like one URL, you go to it, you download an app, you start signing in, and you got it.
It's nice.
It's not as easy in Mastodon, is it?
It's nice and simple when it's all centralized in one spot, right? So Mastodon is different from a lot of those other platforms because it's decentralized. And what that means is that it's not one company, it's not one billionaire that owns it in some cases. And so but it's still easy to get started. So it's a social network, it's a social media platform. If you last tried it, let's say 2 or 3 years ago, when you first came along to the website, it said choose a server, and that was kind of really confusing for a lot of people. What happens right now is you can get started straight away on mastodon.social, which is our flagship instance, and then you can move to a different one if you want to. In terms of the different communities that use Mastodon, there are some really cool servers. So these servers that you can almost think of them like Reddit subreddits, if you like, topic-based communities or geo-based communities, which have their own rules, moderators, cultures, but they can all talk to one another. So you're not cut off by joining a particular server. So I think what you were saying at the start there was right. It's different to other platforms. You don't just download a single app and sign up in one place and get going. You've got more options. Options can be confusing sometimes, but they also give you a lot of benefits. So they give you the option to make sure that you know where your data is, you know who's looking after it, where it's hosted. At the moment, as you and I both know, lots of folks not particularly happy with having their data in certain countries or in the hands of certain wealthy individuals. So there's a lot of opportunity for you to choose where your server is run, even if you want to. And this does go down the geeky path, but we're at Coffee with Developers, we're geeks, I think, to run your own server if you want to. I don't do that myself. I'm on a Mastodon server called macaw.social, which is actually run by some former colleagues of mine from Twitter. Twitter, we had an internal applications framework called Macaw, and so that is a community of former folks that I used to work with there. And I can still participate in the whole network. It's great. The other nice thing is you can, if you want to, talk to people on Blue Sky through there. There's a bridging service that exists, which is built by a couple of really cool folks that I know, Ryan and Anuj. Where Ryan does most of the work on BridgieFed. So that exists as well.
It's an interesting one. Macaw used to be an accessibility testing framework as well, wasn't it? There was a tool a long time ago.
I think you're right, on the web, right?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Now, what does it need to run your own server? Is it also something that would be interesting for companies to do internally rather than having, for example, a Slack instance?
I'm not sure that I would treat it as a replacement for something like Slack necessarily, because Slack is usually more private for conversations. I definitely think there's benefit to running for companies and organizations to run their own Mastodon instances, because right now, for companies to join a social media platform, they are essentially putting their trust in the hands of someone else, right? So this is what's happened with Twitter X. A lot of companies and governments created accounts on X, on Twitter, and then it became X, and it became perhaps less trustworthy for those organizations that have put their communications there. Last year, I wrote a blog post, and I spoke about this at FOSDEM in February, called Fediverse for Freedom. And it happened because the owner of X started to attack politicians in the UK. My support for those politicians is not relevant. It was just a very difficult situation. You know, a billionaire, making ad hominem attacks against elected government officials in another country is kind of not okay. I mean, depending on your worldview, but it's certainly a liability for those organizations to rely on that platform for their communications. So if governments, universities, companies run their own email servers, now a lot of them do outsource that to Gmail or to Microsoft or wherever, but if they were to run their own email and their own web hosting, particularly in a government situation, you're likely to be doing those things, then why not also run your own social media? Why not run your own server and platform? But because you might be running Mastodon, you'd be running an interoperable service based on a standard called ActivityPub.
So what does it need to run your own server? Do you get the Mastodon source code and you just run it on an NPM enhanced? What is the platform technology behind it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a Ruby on Rails app, actually, which is a little unusual, I think, in some respects these days. It's one of the bigger Ruby on Rails apps that's around. I think there's a few others. I actually was invited to give the opening keynote at Ruby World in Japan in December, which was really exciting.
Cool.
Because they'd been wanting to talk about Mastodon and Ruby for a long time. So it's a Ruby on Rails stack with Postgres, Sidekick, and what else am I missing? That's more or less it to run the system. So you could run it in some Docker containers if you wanted to. There's a Docker Compose setup for it, for example. There's also some companies that will offer you hosting. So Mastohost is one of them, for example. And there's some others where you can go along and say, I'd like to pay you a few dollars to run a Mastodon instance for me, or to get my VPS to do that. That's another option. Or you can use one of the existing servers if you want to. Again, that's not. We were talking about organizations, and the likelihood there is you might want to run your own and have it on your own domain. But in this case, you could do that too. So.
I think there's an interesting one, though, because a Mastodon social is like the one that you get from the get-go when you go to Mastodon and you find it as the first one. And because I'm on Toot Cafe, that's basically by one of my colleagues from Microsoft. When Mastodon came around, he just set that up, and he's like, "Okay, cool, I'll do that." What I found frustrating is when I find a Mastodon link somewhere else, like on LinkedIn on something or in a newsletter, and I click it and I want to boost something or retweet it, so to say, then I have to log into my own domain first before I can do it. That seems to be a step that's really confusing for people. Is this something? Why is that needed? Is it because the boost has to come from my server to be traced back in the Fediverse, or why is that necessary?
Yes, there's some usability improvements that we can make. So I tend to use a browser plugin called Graze, which can hide away some of that arguable complexity. So the reason it needs to happen is because the operation happens, as you just said, on your Mastodon instance, on your server, and then it gets published to the one where that content exists. So that's technically why it happens. Mastodon is part of the Fediverse, and the Fediverse is a set of services that all interoperate using a W3 standard called ActivityPub. So it's fairly classic W3, HTTP. There's some JSON data in there, and activity streams as the data format. So it's all standards based. And along with that, there's a bunch of associated protocols. So there's WebFinger, which lets you do the remote lookups to see what the right URLs to interact with are for the remote user. And there's HTTP signatures for authenticated requests. So that's all in the mix. There's also a sort of an aside to the whole Fediverse process called the Fediverse enhancement proposals, FEPs. So these are less sort of highly regulated in the sense of W3C standard, but they are community agreements about improvements that can be made to the way that these different services interoperate. There is one at the moment for something called activity intents, which would allow the server, the remote server where you're wanting to perform the action to sort of go back to your server and when you're logged in and say to do this thing for me, which is essentially what this Graze plugin is doing. It's rewriting the URL to a known URL on your home server to make the activity happen. Yes, you're right. It can be a little bit. It's different. It's a different way of interacting, and the reason it's different is because this is decentralized. There is no single centralized point of control for these things, and the same applies with sharing links. So if you want to do a Fediverse share a link into the Fediverse, then whatever plugin you're using needs to know what your home server is. Hopefully we can improve this over time, and we've certainly got people thinking about ways to do it. It's just a question of lots of people all coming to an agreement, which is never easy.
When I wrote a plugin for WordPress to actually share on Mastodon, and I did the same for like Blue Sky, and I did the same for Twitter back then. And Twitter just had this URL, and it was great.
Yes.
And in Mastodon, I had to okay, you have to define your instance the first time, and then I store it in local storage. So the next time you come back, it's not going to be a problem anymore. But it is once again one of those integration things where it gets tricky. How easy is it to get your own bots running on Mastodon? Because that's something that Twitter used to be great at, but with the changes, it became much harder to have a bot that's not completely like becoming expensive or hard to do, or even allowed, because automated posting at one time was frowned upon. Is that the same in Mastodon, or is it a thing where you just have to play by certain rules to do it?
So I was at Twitter on the developer relations team for a long time, and I always fought to have the API open and free as far as we could have. Now that was challenging at times, especially around certain activities happening in the world, and you didn't want loads of automation because that could be problematic. But it was also extremely cool, and I remember those days really well. On Mastodon, there is a couple of elements that make it a much better and much easier for bots. One of them is that you can mark an account as automated. And actually, when I was at Twitter, we were looking at that feature and we were thinking, oh, that's a good idea. We like that. So actually, towards the end of my time there, just before the acquisition, there was an ability for you to mark an account as automated and say it was owned by another account. But that was kind of in the late in the day there. So first of all, you can mark accounts as automated on Mastodon, so people will know that they're a bot. And yeah, again, because it's using ActivityPub, you've got a lot of reach to the overall network. There's a ton of libraries out already that use the Mastodon API to do things like that, and it's very similar to Twitter in terms of you're using OAuth, you get an API key which is configured in your account. You don't have to go through an application process, which Twitter introduced later in the day, but you had to sort of register to be a developer. You just have an account on Mastodon. You can go in if you know what you're doing, which again, our audience on Coffee with Developers are likely to go and get your API token to get set up. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks building bots and automation. One thing I would say about Mastodon as a small organization of people that work on the software is we are quite fond of authenticity and humans. So we are not really wanting to advocate for everybody to build AI bots, because if people do that, then we're just going to get a lot of junk. And we get a lot of junk on other networks, and we see that, and people want to move away from that. Is our experience. So there's no way, because it's a distributed network, for us to stop you building something that pumps automated AI junk. However, what I think you will find is that the majority of the network will quickly defederate you, so block you, move away from having your content on the platform, because it's rubbish. We don't want that kind of stuff. We'd much rather people have genuine human conversations. Eugene, who's the person who created Mastodon, is a photographer, and he is really a really thoughtful person who loves, genuine, authentic content and real things and physical objects. And it's quite deeply rooted, I think, in our culture as a team, that those are things that we value.
One thing I found, I mean, there were a few instances where there were floods happening, basically, where like lots and lots of posts came in, and for like a day I couldn't use Toot Cafe because it was just basically I couldn't find my things. The other thing is, if you got a successful Toot, or what do you call it?
Yes.
Basically, there's no folding. There's no like 600 people boosted that one, but you get like 600 times a boost, and that's kind of like.
We introduced notification grouping in 4.3, so that is now part of the and in fact it's just the most recent iOS release has just implemented that. So that, you're right, that was a problem with those floods of notifications. We've implemented improvements to that now. These are things that we've taken time. To the point about junk posts, this is another challenge of running a distributed system and a decentralized system with no individual organization that's in charge. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen behind the scenes between the administrators to make sure that we clean up these problematic accounts that are causing problems. And one of the nice things is I do see a lot of that collaboration. It's difficult to do this sort of distributed management of, but then the internet itself is distributed, and it is pretty good. I mean, famously pretty good at self-healing and rooting around problems, right? And it can take a moment, but we genuinely are doing that. One of the reasons why we were finding, let's say 18 months ago or a year ago, that you were getting some of these spam waves was that people had set up instances and then abandoned them. And those instances often had open signups, so people could then easily find them, create a load of accounts, and misuse them. Again, this has been a learning experience. It's an open source project. That's no longer what happens when when you first install a server. It doesn't automatically have open signups, and if an administrator does not sign into it for a period of time and the signups were open, then they will become closed. So we're doing a lot more to sort of manage those kind of behaviors, and that's something that we do through learning. And moving things forward.
When I talk to social media people and I show them Mastodon, and they're like, okay, so where's the stats? Where can I see how many people clicked on it? Where can I see how many people read that and where it's there? That's on the instance to implement that, right? Or is there any way to do that? Because it feels like there's lots of good human answers I get from it, but numbers to show is really, really hard. And especially for DevRel people, that's a thing we need to do. Sadly enough,
So I use a couple of platforms, and I'm going to forget their names. As Mastometrics is one of them. Oh, Mastometrics and Analytodon are two tools that I use, and they're typically for showing your account's growth and the interactions with your posts, rather than, for example, seeing the links or seeing the click-throughs and things like that. Something that we've done in Mastodon, possibly so recently that it's not in the general release yet, so it may only be available on mastodon.social or in the 4.4 alpha, is the fact that you can get a referrer now, so you know when traffic is arriving on your site from Mastodon. That was previously something that we didn't do. But very broadly speaking, and this is a challenging thing to communicate because people want to measure things and want to see metrics like you've just described. We build from a perspective of privacy first, and it's challenging, and I found particularly perhaps with American audiences, but I may be being unfair. It may be just the way that we describe things. When we say privacy first, but we are talking about a platform where we are posting to public, generally speaking, what we mean by privacy first is that we are not tracking you, and that is partly because we're not trying to justify or sell ads, and we're not trying to get as much data as possible so that we can build algorithms that will suck you in and keep you in the platform. We want to have a healthy interaction with the platform. We don't have an algorithm, we don't have advertising, we don't have venture capital, so we're not going to be forced into introducing those features. What that means is we're not tracking you, and what that means is we're not tracking those link clicks, and we're not tracking all of those other things. When I was at Twitter, every single thing you do is highly instrumented behind the background, behind the scenes in the background, and sending it all back to the mothership to tell them exactly how you're using the platform, so that they can do all of those behavioral ads and things like that. So yeah, it's different. You can, you rightly point out, get on your instance, if you run your own instance, put some of that stuff in for yourself, if that's something that's important to you, and that might be another reason why you might run your own instance. But broadly speaking, yeah, we're not doing any of that tracking. So the kinds of metrics you're going to get will be likes and boosts on your posts.
Mm-hmm. There's an interesting interface thing as well, that every server, I guess, if you run it, you're in full control of the UX. You get like a few I guess there's an app, but you can start it any way you want to. So, and it's actually quite fun to go from instance to instance and see how people styled them and what they look like. What I found confusing is that there seems to be emoji for different instances, because I've seen instances with emoji that don't exist on mine.
Yes.
How does that work? Is that something that you host in the instance, or is this something that comes from the Mastodon core?
So you can configure those as an instance owner. You can configure. So that's a bit more like Discord or Slack, where you can have your own emojis for your instance. So yeah, that's something that you can configure.
One thing that also drove me nuts is when I drag in a GIF and it has seemingly random things like this has too many frames. That size is not allowed. Like, like I'm always wondering, like, what did I do wrong? Because I just sometimes I just drag a random GIF in and that doesn't do it, because it tells me like there's a reason why it shouldn't do it.
I can't answer that one without knowing more about the problem. There's a load of work going on. I can tell you that right now there's a load of work going on into improving the way that we do display of media, for example. So there's been a lot of nice stuff happening for tap to interact with the media, which is looking really nice for the next version. But I can't explain what you just described with the GIFs and things, which is annoying. Sorry about that. Again, it's open source. We're improving all the time. So if folks can give us solid bug reports, then we can try to address them.
And there's lots of nasty stuff you can put in GIFs, so that's the other problem. Like, it's a very complex image format that could contain all kind of malware if you don't do it. That's why the others use like Giphy or whatever to pick GIFs that already exist. And I realized that there is no God when I saw how much money Giphy makes. And basically, I'm like, it's a bloody search engine for GIFs. It's all pirated content. It's all like a few frames from a TV show, and still it makes money. It's just a very interesting concept.
I noticed with the new updates to ChatGPT that you can now literally sort of ask for something from movies. I think if you type, I saw somebody posting that, if you type a New York cop in a vest in a high rise, it will literally just give you a picture of Bruce Willis in Die Hard now, with literally just that, exactly. So yeah, it's all of the, as you say, the plagiarism machines are unfortunately very strong. Yeah, again, when I was at Twitter, it was interesting because GIFs get converted to MP4s or video files, and then people would want to get the actual animated GIF back, and you'd be like, no, there is no such thing. We only have the media file. You have to re-encode it.
I guess this came when MP4 got supported natively by OSs, that basically the performance was better of a video than an animated GIF, and the file optimizer in me has his heart screaming right now, because you turn a video into a GIF, you go back to 256 colors with dithering, and basically you lossy in a lossy format, and then you re-encode it as MP4. And if you use like checkerboard dithering on the GIF, the MP4 will be blurry as hell. And it's just like, it's the worst thing you can do to an image to convert it between these two formats and back. But it seems like people wanted it. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a weird thing.
There's an accessibility issue as well with it. Like if I turned off animation in my operating system, GIFs should not, as you said, like interact to click to see it. And I see on my mobile phone, I'm using Tusky. I didn't even know there is an official app. And that one actually doesn't show the images until you load them, just in terms of data traffic, I think.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think that's a really good thing as well, because it forces people to write good alternative text because it shows that one instead of the image.
With my developer relations hat on, I am so happy that I'm working on something again which has a fully open API that enables people to build their own client apps, because that was always one of my challenges at Twitter. When I joined Twitter in 2014, it was in the aftermath of the original sort of API apocalypse there, where they put rate limits in place and change things, and basically they wanted to build their own apps that they could insert their own ads into, and so they sort of slowly ceased to give access to client developers to lots of the new features, which was really frustrating for me. I really wanted that, because you see that at scale, big companies especially cater to the masses and not to everyone, right? So they don't cater to people with accessibility needs, blind users, or people that may want to interact with streams of data in a horizontal scrolling format instead of a vertical scrolling format, or something like that. So there's always both niche use cases and specific use cases for a community of people that you can't be served or won't be served by the global, the globalists that want to just do everything in one way. But having a fully open API where people can make those choices, there's a lovely community of folks building client apps on Mastodon for both Android and iOS, and even for some really retro platforms as well. I think there's one, people have got it running on old Mac OS versions before Mac OS 10. There's people got it running on all kinds of strange environments. So I'm a particular fan of some of those kind of retro folks that are trying to squeeze the client experience down onto strange devices.
I'm really, what I found lovely in Twitter was the cuteness of it, like the fail whale, and like it was this egg when you didn't have anything, when you were unknown, and then became a bird, and it was all this like natural thing, and it actually enticed the community actually to come up with really cool stuff as well, like Follow Friday, and these kind of things came from the community. It didn't come from the company. I remember, I think we were sitting in a pub in San Francisco when Chris Messina was proposing the hashtag. And then I realized, like, nowadays you spend like $5,000 a month for a hashtag, or a day for a hashtag at times. And you're like, wow.
Chris is great. I'm really happy. I mean, I know he's on all the platforms, but I've seen him recently in the last year in San Francisco and talked about hashtags and Twitter. And he's still on the platform on Mastodon. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of great hashtags, hashtag cats of Mastodon and hashtag dogs of Mastodon, which are really good ones to follow. The nice thing about Mastodon as well is you can follow hashtags. So if you are not finding your tribe necessarily, or finding the individuals that you may have expected, you can follow a hashtag of something you're interested in and suddenly start to serendipitously discover new people. I love things like, I'm a pen plotter artist these days, so I follow the pen plotter hashtag, I follow 3D printing hashtag, I follow Doctor Who hashtag, and I see people talking about these topics, and they're in my feed as well as all the people I follow, which is really cool. I find it interesting though, given what you just mentioned about the hashtag and how it kind of came about. It's enduring, cultural relevance, that this idea that Chris had to just put this hash in front of things and group stuff together has become, the source of global movements. We've just seen one at the weekend in the US, and we see them everywhere, and it's in both an advertising context, but also in a community interest context. And I find that really fun.
I remember I was advocating against it on a mailing list because it already is an anchor positioning in the page. So it overrides a link standard, and that's when I realized I'm too anal about these things again. But it was he was right, but he did not make any money off it.
No.
It's interesting that you invent these things, nothing comes of it. Do you see something similar happening in Mastodon right now, that there's community ideas that take on and become a thing in the platform in terms of communication flow?
That's a really good question, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there was a ton of things that came initially from the community in Twitter. I think what's happened now, and my observation is, with both Mastodon and Blue Sky and other things, people have an expectation based on what they've seen in the last decade or 15 years from those other platforms that are now becoming the legacy platforms. But people want all of those features all at once in the new thing, because that's the baseline that they're coming from. I don't necessarily think it has to be. What I've seen, so some examples I've seen on Mastodon of fun things, and I don't think they are by any means the kinds of emergent behaviors that you've just described, but people doing some, again, because it's an open API, people doing some really fun and ridiculous things. And I think these things probably existed before on Twitter as well, but people treating Mastodon as a file system, or sending faxes, or doing some of those retro things. I think from the perspective of user behaviors, we have a continuous set of requests for features to be added, but it is a short form text, mostly text, I mean images and video, but it's not an all things to all people platform. It's not the everything app. It will not be the everything app. It doesn't want to be the everything app, and it doesn't need to be, because the Fediverse has services that can fill many of those gaps and cater to those niches. So there is Pixel Fed for photo sharing. There is PeerTube for video sharing. There is Owncast for live streaming and Twitch type interactions as well. So it's a collection of services that work well together, quite like Unix, and the web. Doesn't have to be everything.
That works fast as well. I remember when Reddit didn't have an image hosting, and then Imager came around and became the thing, and then people started talking on Imager as a platform as well, and Tumblr was the other thing that came out of that one, and there's always things that come. What I found weird is that there is no big community, no company-driven instances of Mastodon that I know about. Like Mozilla did one, but then kind of abandoned it again. I don't know why. Vivaldi seems to be one that is actually growing right now again, which came completely out of left field, because I forgot about Vivaldi as a browser, but it seems to be still there. And I don't know, does W3C have one? Or what do you think stops nonprofits from actually doing their own server? Do they flock onto Blue Sky instead, or?
Well, I think certainly I do see non-profits on Mastodon. Whether or not they run their own servers is another thing. Some of them, I know that we've been talking to some of them about hosting. So, for example, we host Mastodon, the organization hosts the instance for the European Commission, and we're open to having conversations with helping other people if that's what they need. They need that expertise to help them to set something up and have something hosted and operated for them. But certainly you've got brain is blanking, which isn't great in my current role. You've got a number of big open source projects who have created their own instances or do operate their own instances. But then there's others who just exist on an existing server like Mastodon and have their own accounts there. I see, but to answer the point about Blue Sky, I see companies and nonprofits and organizations being in both places. I don't think either of these things is going to go away in a hurry. I think that where the data is and how it's used are things that people are, especially in Europe, legitimately concerned about, and therefore thinking increasingly about how they do their own hosting and how they manage their own accounts. And I think that's really important for all of us to consider at this time, and unfortunately in this time in history.
One thing that drove me kind of crazy is trying to find bulk import and export tools. Like, how do I get all the people that follow me on X, which is over 60,000, and there was cross-referencing tools at one time. There was one I remember that looked like Windows 95 and had like this really cool toolbar and everything. but it seems like it's tricky to find the right people again. When before the talk right now, I said that Blue Sky feels really interesting because all the people that Twitter, when in 2004 when I started, or was it 2004 probably. The big bulk of people that followed each other back then, which came from web design, mailing lists, and these kind of things, and W3C discussion lists. And these are the people that now came in bulk on Blue Sky as well. And I was like, this is really interesting. And on Mastodon, they were before already there, but in like 20 different instances. So it always feels like, where's my crowd? That feels like a hard thing to find out about.
I think so. I did a big exit from X when I was made to leave the company, and at that time a lot of those tools were still around because the Twitter API hadn't at that point been completely eviscerated. So it was possible to get exports and figure out who was where. In Europe, in the last few months, since January 20th, in fact, there have been some tools built. So there's Hello Quit X, which I think is now called X migration, something like that. There's a tool that was built in France, which but still let you do some element of that if you got your Twitter data export, I think. But it no longer did the interactive go and find out. One of the things that it never let you do, of course, and Mastodon does enable you to do if you choose to move between servers, is have the people that follow you transparently refollow you in the new spot. So if you wanted to move, and I did, from mastodon.social to mccall.social, then in that process, if the two servers are there, then the Mastodon can coordinate telling all of your followers that your new account is over here now, and refollow you in that place. So you don't lose followers, which is really cool. What was my point? I'm losing my thread. Something great that Blue Sky built, which we've definitely looked at and seen, is starter packs. There is no question that starter packs have been a real boost to both the growth of Blue Sky and the people's comfort in terms of finding those communities. I think I'm in the DevRel starter pack on Blue Sky, and people find my Blue Sky account that way. Now, I don't use that Blue Sky account very much. I have another one which is a bridged version of my Mastodon account, and that's not in the starter pack. But there is somebody that's tried to build something similar for Mastodon. So if you go to fedidevs.com, then somebody's already got some starter packs for Mastodon there. One of the things that we've been thinking about as we consider whether and how to add them into Mastodon core is consent. So something that I don't think is possible on Blue Sky is that you don't get to choose whether or not you're allowed to be added to a starter pack, and you don't have the option to remove yourself from a starter pack. You have to ask the person that made it to remove you. Now that could be problematic. I can definitely see ways in which that could be abused if people wanted to be awful. In the most part, I see really nice people on Blue Sky, and I don't see that happening. But these are things that we definitely think about carefully when we're looking at new features on Mastodon, and that's been a concern. Apart from the other issue, which is that we're a tiny team with limited resources trying to help tens of thousands of servers that already exist to migrate between versions in a smooth way and not have issues.
Twitter had the same with lists. That was a problem as well, because you ended up on some awful lists at times, and there was no way to remove yourself. And that was similar, it seems.
That was, and we don't want to repeat those kind of issues. I think at a later stage, you could say that you didn't want to be added to them. You can definitely say on Mastodon that you don't want to be added to lists. And so, for example, that stops that problem. But lists on Mastodon are local to your instance; they're not global lists, which is quite different.
So you said a small team of people. How many people are in Mastodon?
I want to say we're about 10 or 12 people now working on the core team, but we've got a couple of open hires that are just in the process of joining. We had a Echo join us last week. I just wrote about in our monthly engineering blog post. We have another front-end developer joining, I think, next month. And we've got a designer position open as well. So we're in a good position at the moment. We're adding to the team to help us to grow and accommodate some of those new requirements that have been coming through. But yeah, it's been very lean, and it's been even more lean in that whole period where you've had the big rush from other platforms. It's been even smaller. It's entirely funded by donations. There's no venture capital, so it's something that we think carefully about as we figure out how to grow the team.
I was pretty shocked to see the valuation of Discord the other day, because I mean, I don't understand Discord. I use it a few times, but it feels like a unit test through every interface that you can put in an interface. There's buttons for everything. There's like, is it a video thing? Is it a chat? What is it? It's like so many things at the same time. But then I saw just like how big it is, and I guess it's because of the gaming communities and just the sheer number of people using it and being possible advertising consumers.
I mean, I've started to get the ads, and they're annoying, and they pop up in places that are covering chunks of the interface I need to use, so I can't avoid them. And I mean, I must be in dozens. I'm probably in dozens of them, and you know, we use it for some of our community conversations. I don't love it, and I also find it alarming that so many open source projects have Discord communities, because it's not open source, and it's quite problematic from that perspective. But yeah, it's been very popular and successful, as you say. It's been free and relatively easy to get started. If you're trying to set up your own instance or server, my experience has been there's a lot of knobs to twiddle and buttons and things to try and find to change to get the community interaction right, which has been frustrating. But I guess every project has its rough edges. So.
Talking of which, outside contributions to Mastodon, do you have a lot? Do you want more? And what is needed most at the moment?
So we're super grateful for all the contributions we get of whatever level they're at. One thing from a bug tracking perspective is our GitHub trackers are usually quite busy, because we don't always get super well validated bugs. So if people are wanting to log issues with us, then do try and do a little bit of checking to make sure that nobody's already submitted the same thing. We've got some great folks that do help us with triage, which is wonderful. I have the pleasure of writing our monthly engineering blog post, where we sort of cover the metrics, right? How many pull requests we've closed this month, how many contributions we've had from how many different contributors. It's a fairly complicated code base, and also especially if you're doing stuff on the protocol level, you really need to understand this activity pub protocol quite a lot of detail. So we do a lot of review on the code that comes in, and that kind of can seemingly slow things down, but it's because we want to make sure that things are in a good state, and that also it can be supported going forward. We don't want people to just come and drop a feature and then run away and never come back, and we have to support it. We'd much rather have something that we know fits the vision of the product. We always love people helping, especially with the triage. We love people helping us to contribute by telling the story of Mastodon and explaining and getting people involved and helping them to join a server. And beyond that, yeah, I mean, we absolutely take pull requests. We accept issues. Just be aware that we're a tiny team, and it may take us a while to get to some of them, especially on as well when it's touching the user interface. We've got this new designer coming in. We also want things to look consistent and coherent, and not just patchwork type approach to UI. So some of those things get closer review as well. But we've got a contributing guide in the top level GitHub repository that explains kind of what our process is, how best to get involved, where to contribute.
Cool. I love the disconnect picture, that little elephant with the two cables that are not connecting. So designer did some really good job there at the beginning. That was really lovely.
We've got a fantastic artist called Dopper2, who's based in, I think, Brazil, who does our little mascot, the little elephant mascot, the Mastodon mascot, which is really cute, and we're really grateful for that. I think it's one of the coolest mascots, and we're selling this big plushie from our merch store. I think it's sold out now, but at least in Europe. But yeah, that's super cool.
So do you get lots of lashback from the PHP community, because they were the first ones to have the elephant, right?
We had a meeting of mascots at FOSDEM. In fact, the PHP elephant came around walking around the event, and we just had our little plushie sitting on our table for people to come and take selfies with. So I think the PHP elephant did attempt to steal ours, but yeah, we weren't having any of that.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much. This was great. We want to keep those short so people don't have to listen too long to us. It would be fun to do more. It would be great to see you at our event as well, and to see what else is happening with Mastodon. And if you haven't tried Mastodon yet, give it a go. There's also, I mean, one thing that you said, that there's an opportunity to actually cross-link when you post from one place to another. Do you have any tool that allows you to post on Mastodon, Blue Sky? Is there something like a Trillion or an Adium for different social media platforms now?
So Buffer does that. There is oh gosh, what's the name of it? There's a couple of apps that let you do that. There's one I think called, and my mobile device is iOS rather than Android, and I'm thinking of iOS specifically. But there's I think one called Croissant. I'm just tapping at my phone over here to have a look. But there's a ton of tools that let you do cross posting. And of course, something like WordPress or your CMS may well let you post your links to both places as well. So yeah.
Well, that's another thing. A lot of people integrate it into their blogs as much like pingbacks used to be before they became an attack vector and like annoyance. There's a lot of people who use like comments on Mastodon rather than having a comments on their own blog, and that's a really interesting concept as well.
The WordPress have actually built an ActivityPub plugin, full end-to-end ActivityPub plugin, so it can be part of the network. So if you're on WordPress, your blog user can be another actor that can be interacted with through ActivityPub, and you can get comments through Mastodon into your blog, which I think is really smart. Ghost has done the same thing. So Ghost is an open source newsletter platform, really good one, and they've just built full ActivityPub support, and they've just released, I think, the beta for their new version, which is going to have that in it. So yeah, I think it's really smart.
All right. This was Coffee with Developers with Andy Piper. It was great to catch up after all these years, and more to come. So you will see this on YouTube. You will listen to it on Buzzsprout or wherever it's going to be there. And we're going to have this in the newsletter this Friday. So if you're from the newsletter, hi. And if you're from the future, this was in the past. So thanks very much, Andy. It was great to see you again. And hopefully Mastodon will. I mean, what is success to you in Mastodon? I mean, it's like you don't want to beat the numbers of Twitter. You don't want to be. I mean, what is success for Mastodon as a company?
I think having as many people using open protocols and owning their own data, owning their own destiny. We'd love that to be on Mastodon. ActivityPub is a great set of protocols, and we want the Fediverse to grow, and we want it to thrive. And it's not a zero-sum game, as they say, right? We want this to be part of a community of services that exist together. So growth is part of it, but endless user growth is not something that is necessary here. We want everybody to have the opportunity to use platforms that respect them and respect their data.
And this is how you become head of communications. Thanks very much, Andy. It was great to see you. Bye-bye.